Round one, fight.
Hey, did you hear that? Why is that on the arcade version Mr. Big's theme sounds very cold and industrial? Something very fitting for a mob boss, right? But when Art of Fighting was ported over to the Super Nintendo, the music changed drastically. It wasn't simply downgraded to fit the cartridge, the entire vibe changed. Went from cold to funky. Today we're going to be talking about Mr. Big's theme. We're going to talk about the history of the change along with the technical limitations of the Super Nintendo and the Neo Geo arcade, and talk about the differences between the two. And answer the big question, what the hell happened to Mr. Big's theme? Hey, what's up? This is Freelancer back with another video. How I've been? Thanks for asking. I've been good. I've been playing Fatal Fury City of the Wolves whenever I can. The DLC for City of the Wolves, Mr. Big, should be arriving pretty soon. For those who don't know, Mr. Big is the last DLC character in Season Pass 1. And the biggest notable thing about him is that he's from another SNK fighter, Art of Fighting, which I covered in my SNK timeline video. Check that out if you haven't yet. I remember I was very young when I first played Art of Fighting, and my memory of it was hazy, but the one thing I do remember clearly was how memorable the theme was. The tune was simple, catchy, and it really stuck with me. I remember I used to hum it randomly for years, and then later in life as I got older and curious, I decided to look up Mr. Big's theme again just to see if it still hits the same. When I played what I thought was the song on YouTube, I was surprised. It sounded completely different from what I remembered. I thought I was going crazy until I realized the track I've been listening to was the arcade/Neo Geo version. What I needed to listen to was the Super Nintendo version. That's when the confusion kicked in. Why is the arcade and the Super Nintendo version so drastically different? I knew that during the arcade to 16-bit era, the music wouldn't be a one-to-one match because of hardware limitations. But usually they did sound similar. The Super Nintendo version of Mr. Big's theme might as well be a brand new song. So I went down the online rabbit hole to figure out what happened, because you know I like researching useless information like that. Okay, so let's talk about hardware. To understand why these ports sounded so different, you have to look at what they were trying to copy. The Neo Geo was a beast compared to the home console of the time. The Neo Geo used the Yamaha YM2610 sound chip, which had 15 distinct sound channels, including 7 dedicated to high-quality digital samples. The arcade soundtrack relied heavily on these crystal clear samples for drums, voice clips, and realistic instruments. That's why the original Art of Fighting soundtrack feels so sharp, punchy, and full. When Art of Fighting was ported to the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, the work was handled by entirely different teams. SNK licensed out the development for each system. Monolith Core/Takara handled the Super Nintendo version, while Sega developed the Genesis port in-house. While Takara is the name most players saw on the box and title screen, the actual programming for the SNES version was done by Monolith. Now, the Super Nintendo sound chip, the SPC 700, was also sample-based, which theoretically made it similar to the Neo Geo. But the Super Nintendo had one major limitation. It only had 64 kilobytes of audio RAM. That meant the developers simply couldn't fit the large, high-quality arcade samples into that tiny space. To work around this, they had to replace realistic instruments with much smaller, more generic MIDI-style samples. For example, swapping some trumpet sounds with a synth trumpet, shorten and loop sections of tracks to save memory, change tempos or add new backing instruments that fit the SNES strengths better. These changes often gave the Super Nintendo ports the remix feel instead of having a direct one-to-one sound. The Genesis, meanwhile, used the YM2612, a FM synthesis chip. Instead of playing back instrument recordings, the Genesis generated sounds using waveforms and math, basically a pure synthesized audio. Because of that, it was physically impossible for the system to recreate Neo Geo's sample-heavy tracks exactly. So the sound team had to listen to the arcade music and recreate it by ear using FM instruments. Real drums were replaced with noise-based hits, saxophones and guitars became the iconic twangy FM sound, and in some cases, like certain ending themes, the Genesis version included music that wasn't in the arcade game at all, likely because the team couldn't replicate the original track and chose to compose a new one instead. With that context, let's look at the Art of Fighting soundtrack as a whole. Both the Super Nintendo and the Genesis had major limitations, but honestly, they did a pretty solid job recreating most of the soundtrack in a way that fit the hardware. Here are a few examples. Now we turn to the key subject of the video, Mr. Big. The Genesis version of Mr. Big's theme, Blue Moon Factory, stays fairly close to the arcade original, not perfect, but recognizable and clearly trying to replicate the source material. The SNES version, however, is completely different. Based on everything we just went over, the SNES could have attempted a more faithful recreation just like it did for the rest of the soundtrack, but for Mr. Big specifically, it didn't. The track sounds like a totally new composition. I researched this extensively to find an explanation, interviews, developer notes, sound chip analysis, even obscure message boards, but I came up empty. There's no official reasoning for the change, no documented explanation, nothing archived the way other game development stories sometimes are. I know it's not the most exciting conclusion, but believe me when I say I really did try to find a definitive answer to this mystery. So for now, let's assume the composer at Monolith ran into some sort of issue while trying to recreate Blue Moon Factory and decided to create something entirely new instead. And honestly, I call it the highlight of the entire SNES soundtrack. This track is full of hype and swagger, exactly the kind of energy you expect from a mob boss style villain running a city clearly inspired by Miami. But as much as I love this theme, there's a good chance we'll never hear it officially used again. With Mr. Big coming to City of the Wolves soon, SNK already released his new theme, and if you got a good ear, you notice it's actually a violin-heavy remix of Dustman from King of Fighters 96. It's a good remix, don't get me wrong, but the song originates from KOF. Wouldn't it make more sense to remix his main theme from the game he originally came from? Why not remix Blue Moon Factory? Or better yet, why not remix the SNES theme? A mere modern remix of that track would be pure hype and perfect for putting the beats on someone. As I mentioned earlier, the original port wasn't developed directly by SNK, but the SNES version specifically, the work was done by Monolith Core, and they were the ones who composed the SNES exclusive theme. Now, there could be some legal reason preventing SNK from using that track today, anything from licensing issues to unclear ownership. If that's the case, it's a real shame. An absolute banger like that deserves to be acknowledged, revised, or even fully remixed for a new generation. I doubt anything official will happen. I still hold out hope that this song gets some sort of revival someday. Anyway, there you go. That's the mystery behind the change to Mr. Big's theme. What are your thoughts? Do you feel the same way that I do? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, check out my other content, like the full SNK timeline video, or my Dead or Alive is officially turning into a dating sim video. I got more videos coming soon, so keep an eye out for those, and follow me on Twitter as well. Thanks again. I'll catch you next time.